Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Welcome to this video on getting started with Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi. Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi is probably the most influential figure in the history of Sufism. In the Stanford Encyclopedia of Islamic Philosophy, which is online, in the entry on Ibn al-Arabi by William C. Chittick, William Chittick argues that Ibn al-Arabi may be considered the most important philosopher in the history of Islam. Of course, he would not have characterized himself as a philosopher, but whatever the case may be, I think one can safely say that he is one of, if not the most influential figure, probably in the history of the Islamic intellectual heritage, the Turath al-Fikri. And he's also, at the same time, probably one of the most controversial figures in the history of Islam as well. So who is he? Well, Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi was born in Murcia, which is in present-day Spain, in the Hijra year 560, corresponding to 1165 of the Christian calendar, dying in 1240 of the Christian calendar, or in the year 638 of the Hijra. He spent his early years in that part of the world, in the western lands of Islam, and ultimately migrated toward the eastern lands of Islam, never to return, finally settling in Damascus, and that is where his final resting place is. He died there in 638, as I already said, in 1240. Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi authored a huge number of works. Now, I had a very learned professor whom I studied with in Cairo many years ago as a graduate student by the name of Uthman Yahya. Uthman Yahya, unfortunately we don't have a boom mic, so I'm just holding this and trying to do this at the same time. There's far too many books here to have stacked up, and I just have to walk around on my shelves and show you. So Uthman Yahya authored this work in 2 volumes in French. This is the Histoire et classification de l'œuvre d'Ibn Arabi, published in Damascus, 1964. So this is the history and classification of the works of Ibn Arabi. And he mentions about 900 odd works which are ascribed to him. Good number of these, like more than half, exact figures are in this volume, or in these volumes, are spurious. And so 400 odd works, well north of 400 odd works of varying length may be ascribed, were authored by Ibn al-Arabi throughout his life. Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi is most famous for a number of doctrines. So let's talk about those first before we get into how to approach studying Ibn al-Arabi, especially if you don't know Arabic, which is really what this is about. This video is about how to get started with Ibn al-Arabi, and even how to even go beyond getting started. But I'm going to go through a lot of the works which have been written on or about Ibn al-Arabi, or studies on Ibn al-Arabi in the English language. So Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi is most famously, his name is associated with the doctrine of wahdat al-wujud, or the unicity of being, which is a very proper translation of that. In other words, it is related to it is the doctrine that states that nothing truly and properly exists in the proper sense of the meaning of the word exists except God. The existence of all other things is relative, so to speak. It is contingent. It is only God who is, to use the language of Ibn Sina, wajibul wujud, or the necessary being. And so then the universe in its entirety, and the word universe, which we may also replace with the word cosmos, I have in mind the Arabic word al-alam. The word al-alam in Arabic means everything other than God. So al-alam, kulla ma siwa Allah, or everything other than God. The cosmos is nothing but the reflection in some way or another of the divine names. So the entire cosmos, the entire universe is then seen as the theophany or the tajalliyat of al-asma'ul ilahiyya, of the divine names. And the supreme tajalli, or the strongest tajalli, so to speak, or locus of manifestation, is the human being. Because Allah says in the Quran, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, and He taught Adam the names, all of them. So the human being potentially has the potential to actualize these divine names through its journey in this life, and that, of course, is the goal of Sufism. And alongside with this is the notion, another doctrine, which is the doctrine of the perfect man, al-insanu al-kamil, or if you prefer, the perfect or complete human being. This, of course, is the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then there are, but then at the same time, each individual human being has a certain possibility of attaining to a certain degree of perfection, and in each and every age and time, there's a person who is at the apex of that. And these are all detailed sort of Sufi doctrines, but this is what is associated with Ibn al-Arabi. So again, wahdatul wujud, or the unicity of being, the notion, the doctrine of the tajalliyat, or the theophany of the divine names, the doctrine of the perfect man, the doctrine of what are called al-a'yan al-thabita, or the fixed entities, which many people have likened to or equated with the Platonic ideas or forms. Ibn al-Arabi is known as al-Shaykh al-Akbar. He is known to posterity as the greatest master. He is also known as al-Kibrit al-Ahmar, the red sulfur, because of the extreme rarity of such an individual. The image is taken from alchemy, Islamic alchemy. So if you don't know anything about Ibn al-Arabi and you just want to start, this simple little book is where you can begin. It's called The Voyage of No Return by Claude Hadas. Claude Hadas is the daughter of the great, very great scholar of Muḥyī al-Arabi in modern times, namely Michel Chodkiewicz. I have more than one copy of some of these books. Chodkiewicz's famous study on Ibn al-Arabi is Seal of the Saints, Prophethood and Sainthood in the Doctrine of Ibn Arabi. Let's just display these here for the moment. So these are really good places to start. This is a kind of brief account, which, if you don't have a lot of time and you just want to get a quick idea, this is the book to go to. You could actually read this on a cross-country flight. If you get on a plane in LA and get down to New York, you can be done with this book, right? It's a 4 or 5 hour read, depending on how fast you read. If you want a more detailed biography of Ibn al-Arabi, and I stress the word biography, this is a biography. It's a life. It's not a life and thought. It's by the same person, Claude Hadas. Beautiful cover. The Quest for the Red Sulfur, The Life of Ibn Arabi. So those are places, those are books where you can start. And the problem is when you have so many books, you pile them on top of each other and then you can't reshelve them without making a mess. Another really interesting book on Ibn Arabi by Chodkiewicz is An Ocean Without Shore, Ibn Arabi, the Book and the Law. So these are not really exactly beginner books, but they're not exactly impossibly advanced books either. Once you've sort of made your first, if you've read one of the Hadas books, the Claude Hadas books, you can easily read any of these. Let's just put these here somewhere to get them out of the way for now. And get started on Ibn al-Arabi. But Ibn al-Arabi is a difficult author. So among these almost 500, 400 odd books that he wrote, there are two which really stand out for posterity and which are constantly read by people who study Ibn al-Arabi in every age. One is called Fusus al-Hikam, Fusus al-Hikam, which may be translated as the bezels of wisdom. I prefer the translation, the quintessence of wisdom. This is a very short book in Arabic. If you just take the bare text and type it up and put it in a normal book size, like 6 by 9 inches, it'll barely, if you have no footnotes and nothing, it'll barely be 100 pages. So that's one book, Fusus al-Hikam. So it's a short book. Then there is a massive book by Ibn al-Arabi called al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah, which means the Meccan illuminations. This is a very, very large book. There is an autographed manuscript of it that survives. It was originally held in Konya because it was bequeathed to his disciple Sadruddin Qunawi, whose library was there, is there and remains there, and now it is in Istanbul in a place called the Türk ve İslam Eserleri Müzesi, the Turkish and Islamic museum in Istanbul. And it's a very large manuscript. It's in 37 notebooks, we could say, 37 volumes. So it's a big, big book. It has been published before. It was published under the sponsorship of a great devotee of Ibn al-Arabi from the I think 19th and early 20th century would be right. Namely, someone named Al-Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, who was a known sort of freedom fighter against the French occupation in Algeria, but he was a devotee of the teachings of the Sheikh al-Akbar. And anyway, ultimately he was exiled in Damascus and he died there. Then his remains were later taken back to Algeria after Algerian independence. And he sponsored this edition. I cannot even hold this with one hand. I don't have the grip because here we are. Oh, this is it. This is pretty heavy. So this is, about 3,000 pages. Okay. And there is no critical edition of this book. So I'm going to hold this up here, or you can maybe focus here and you can see that there is no punctuation. There is no paragraph. There is nothing in this edition. All right. So there was a critical edition which was begun by my teacher, the same person who wrote this book, Uthman Yahya. And this is Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah. This came out in 1985, as you can see in my writing. I've written with a Sharpie or some kind of marker, which is 1405 of the Hijrah, which I've written there in Arabic. My library stamps are there. This is volume 1. And so each volume, which was being brought out by Uthman Yahya, was to correspond to one of the notebooks. So there would have been 37 of these. He died having only reached volume 14. And I took classes with him, and this volume 1 has his autograph and dedication to me right here. I don't think I've ever shown this on my channel, but there it is. So yes, I did study with Uthman Yahya. Okay. So this was not completed then in recent years. Must have been around the time I left Cairo, something like 2014, 2015, or about thereabouts. A Yemeni scholar by the name of, I think his name is Sultan Ahmad al-Mansub. Kind of a weird name, but anyway. He basically just transcribed the Konya manuscript, which I should point out is in the handwriting of Ibn al-Arabi. I have a digital copy of the whole thing. And it's written in Maghribi script. And has the signature of Ibn Arabi and many important audition notes on many pages. So there is no translation that is complete to my knowledge as yet at the time of making this video of the entire Futuhat, but there is a fellow who is working on it, and my understanding is that he's gotten pretty far along. And many volumes have appeared, and his name is Eric Winkle. And I happen to have one volume of this only. I really am not interested in reading Ibn Arabi in English, but a friend of mine gave this to me as a gift. I don't have any of the other volumes. I'm not against them, but I don't really see any point since I know Arabic and I really don't have room, so I'm not really interested in collecting all of the volumes published by Eric Winkle. But my understanding is that he has been working on this for a very long time, and he has apparently done a good job. I've actually never read this. Like I said, it was a gift from a friend, and he inscribed it to me, and I just keep it on my shelf. So let's say something about Chittick. Before Winkle started his work, Chittick was bringing out a kind of comprehensive study of Ibn al-Arabi based on his reading of the Futuhat. And that is in this, the first volume to appear is called The Sufi Path of Knowledge by William C. Chittick. And it is a double column book. So it's very dense. Like, look at that on each page. And there's lots of footnotes and so forth. So basically what Chittick has done, I happen to know that Chittick has read the entire Futuhat from cover to cover. And if I'm not mistaken, he's done it twice at least. So the man is no fool. He really knows what he's doing here, in the sense that he's one of the few people, at least in the Western Academy. He's no dilettante. He's gone through the whole book. And what he has done is he has translated passages in this and done a great service to the person who doesn't have the knowledge of the Arabic by classifying and organizing this material under headings and chapters and so forth, which give a very systematic presentation of the doctrines of Ibn Arabi. And the companion volume to this is this one here, the Cosmology volume, the Self-Disclosures of God. So this is a great place to start to really jump into Ibn Arabi if you get these two. And apparently he was supposed to bring out a third. I don't think he did. He abandoned that project for whatever reason. And he goes into a lot of these, sort of his process and how he was working and his thought process in the intros to those books. Okay, what about the Bezels of Wisdom? Well, it's a much shorter book. Yes, so there is a small industry of translating the Bezels of Wisdom, or the Fusus al-Hikam. There's a lot of translations. The first translation I ever came across was this one in the Classics of Western Spirituality by R.W.J. Austin. This is my original one from when I was an undergrad. That's where I started with Ibn Arabi. I actually have 3 copies of these. Say, well, why do you have so many? Well, I've lived all over the world, and there were various times where I had to buy other ones, and I made notes in them, so I have various copies. That's probably, I would still say, probably the best translation. Austin, when he did that translation, he did consult some commentaries, but the important point is he consulted the most important manuscript of the Fusus al-Hikam, which again is a Konya manuscript, and you can get an idea. Where's the color plates? This is a color plate from the manuscript in the handwriting of Sadruddin Qunawi, and it has a signature not on this particular page that I'm showing you now, but on the opening page of the manuscript of Ibn al-Arabi. And this, in case you're wondering, is the critical edition of the Fusus al-Hikam by myself. My picture there on the back. This was published in Cairo in 2015, just before I left that country for who knows for how long. I haven't been back since.
Where can people buy this?
If you want to get this, you have to contact me. But email me. But the fact is, I have been trying for a while to bring out a second edition of this revised, and I hope that will be taking place very soon. And when that is in place, I will make an announcement, and then it'll be much easier for you to obtain the book in the Western world. I actually voweled every single word, and there's about 1,000 footnotes. And anyway, I did a lot of work on this. So Austin, when he made his translation, he did rely on that same manuscript. But there have been a lot of other translations that have been done. The other really famous translation is this one by Janer Dagli. I don't particularly like it. If you ask me why, it's not an easy question to answer unless you know Arabic. So it's my scholarly opinion. This is another translation. This is a highly idiosyncratic and strange translation by Aisha Abdurrahman al-Tarjumana. If any of you have heard of Sheikh Abdul Qadir, originally he called himself Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Sufi al-Darqawi. Then he was Abdul Qadir al-Murabit, formed the Murabitun movement. He was a very interesting and unusual, peculiar man. And Aisha Abdurrahman al-Tarjumana was part of that. And this came out in the early days when he was still calling himself Abdul Qadir al-Sufi. He wrote a book in those days called The Way of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was a very interesting book. Then later he kind of changed his views and he wrote this book called Root Islamic Education. He has a lot of books. And he was a British convert to Islam. His non-Muslim name before he was Muslim was Ian, I-A-N, Dallas. And under that name, he wrote a very interesting novel called The Book of Strangers. You can look for it online. This is another translation, partial. It's not really by Titus Burckhardt. Titus Burckhardt of the perennialist school, follower of Frithjof Schuon, referred to my Sayyid Nasr reading list. He did a partial translation of this into French. And then the French was translated into English by Angela Colm Seymour. This is published by the Bishara people. You can do what you like. I'm not a big fan of Bishara. What else? Who else has translated the Fusus? I have translations in other languages. I don't know if they're relevant for English speakers. I will show this just because this is the worst translation of the Fusus al-Hikam that has ever been done in the history of mankind, by Binyamin Abrahamov. You can tell by the name that he hails from a particular part of the world. I honestly think that this man does not know a word of Arabic properly. It is an awful, awful translation. It was published by Routledge, and it was sent to someone whom I know rather well, and he told them that it shouldn't be published, but they didn't listen to him. He was a reader, or whatever you want to call it, someone they consult. But anyway, that's the one translation to avoid, in case you haven't figured it out. So there are a lot of, if you don't know Arabic, you're really at a disadvantage. At some point, if you really want to understand Ibn al-Arabi, you have to learn Arabic. And the problem with all of these translations of Ibn al-Arabi's Fusus is that they really don't look at the commentary literature. So I want to talk a bit about commentaries on the Fusus. I have a whole shelf full of them. Ibn al-Arabi had his own sort of summary of the Fusus called the Naqshul Fusus. And Chittick did a partial translation of that in this edition, or in this number, of the Journal of the Muḥyī Ibn Arabi Society. This is volume 1, 1982. I don't know if you can even find this anymore. Maybe there's an online version on their website. Again, this is the Bishara people. So that's not really a commentary. And then the first commentary which appeared on the Fusus is this. It's called the Kitabul Fukuk by his student Sadruddin Qunawi, and it is not a line-by-line commentary. This is the edition of Muhammad Khajavi, may Allah have mercy on him, a great Iranian scholar, and it contains the Persian translation as well. And it was after Sadruddin Qunawi, we have Muḥyī ad-Dīn al-Jandi, who produces the first proper commentary. Now, the very interesting thing is that none of these commentaries are published in the Arab world. Everything so far I've shown you is only published in Iran. Iran and in the Shia world, that is a place where Ibn al-Arabi was read very closely and very deeply. So that's the first commentary. Then, and he was a student of Sadruddin Qunawi. Then Muḥyī ad-Dīn al-Jandi's student was Abdul Razak al-Kashani. He was, oddly enough, he was Shīʿī, and I have many editions of Kashani. So here is an early lithograph of Kashani's commentary on the Fusus. Look at that, isn't that pretty? Yeah. So this is a litho. You got it? This is a lithograph, and then it was published in movable type in Cairo. I have this very nicely bound one. Let me just open this so you can see that it's very, very faint. I had this copied from the original and bound in Cairo back in the day. And on the bottom, there are selected comments from the commentary by a much later Ottoman commentator named Bali Effendi. Bali Effendi's commentary is published separately. Unfortunately, I only have the Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya. A lot of the editions by Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiya Beirut are not that good, but I'm just showing you what I've got. And we have the more proper edition of Kashani by Ayatollah Majid Hadizadeh of Iran, who produced this more modern type edition. That's Majid Hadizadeh. Then we have Kashani's student was Dawood Qaisari, and I have many editions of Dawood Qaisari. So here's important. This is in 2 volumes. This is Dawood Qaisari. This is Dawood Qaisari. This is a copy of the Dawood Qaisari litho, which was published in Bombay. Look at that. Then we have another edition of Dawood Qaisari, not very nice one. And then we have the 2-volume one with the glosses of the late and much mourned Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Amuli. May Allah have mercy on his soul. That's Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, rahimahullah, on the back. But the one I like the best is this brick of a book, the Sharh Fusus al-Hikam. This is the edition prepared by Sayyad Jalaluddin Ashtiani, and has many comments and glosses by other people, including Ashtiani's teacher, Ayatollah Khomeini, which is why we have this Khomeini biography right here on the shelf. Khomeini is a modern figure who was heavily influenced by the teachings of Muḥyī ibn al-Arabi, and he wrote a very important book called Misbah al-Hidayah ila al-Khilafati wal-Wilayah, which is heavily indebted to the doctrines of Ibn al-Arabi and the notion of the perfect man, which he connects with the doctrine of the imamate. These were published separately. So Khomeini's glosses on the Fusus al-Hikam were published separately by Dar al-Mahajjat al-Bayda in Beirut. And this is a copy of that. There was recently a conference in June of this year at the University of Toronto's Department of Philosophy, jointly sponsored by the Shīʿah Research Institute of Toronto, where I presented a paper, and there were very good papers there, on Ibn Arabi's influence on Khomeini. And the whole conference was devoted to, if you actually type in on Google, Ibn Arabi, Toronto, Shīʿah Research Institute, it'll come up. It was on the Shīʿah reception of Ibn Arabi, and I'll be co-editing the volume of papers that were presented there. And once that is near publication, we will announce that on our channel. So there's a huge commentary tradition on the Fusus al-Hikam, but none of this has appeared in English. So there's a lot of work to do. I can't do anything. Some kid out there, go and learn Arabic, be inspired by this video and go and do it. I don't have time to do everything. I'm not getting any younger. Who knows? Maybe at some point I'll do something along these lines, but I really don't know. So there are many translations of the Fusus. The Fusus has been translated into Persian. Here's a translation in Persian by the famous Sufi teacher Khwaja Parsa. Parsa died in 822 of the Hijrah. Here is an anonymous Persian translation. It's basically a Persian sort of paraphrase. It's not anonymous, sorry. By Tajuddin Hussain Khwarizmi, died around 838. This is edited by, again, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Amuli. Here is an Urdu translation. Here is an Urdu translation by Maulana Muhammad Abdul Qadir Sahab Siddiqui. The more recent Urdu translation Came out in Pakistan by whoever it's by. Who is this? Urdu Tarjuma. Yeah, Abrar Ahmad Shahi. Abrar Ahmad Shahi. This is Urdu. There was another critical edition that came out around the same time as mine by my friend and colleague Professor Mahmoud Erol Khalich and his colleague Abdurrahim Al-Kish. This one has the advantage that it has a facsimile of the whole manuscript reproduced in the book. It's very nice. You can only get this in Turkey. I should say that this Abrar Shahi translation, it's an Urdu translation, but it also has a critical edition, again by the scholar from Yemen, Sultan al-Mansub. So there's all of this stuff on Ibn al-Arabi. There have been studies, like here's one by Kinish, on the controversial side of Ibn al-Arabi, how he was a locus for controversy among theologians, and this is the focus of this book, Ibn Arabi in the later Islamic tradition, the making of a polemical image in medieval Islam. It's an excellent work. So in case you're wondering what Ibn Taymiyyah had to say about Ibn Arabi, I'll give you a hint. It wasn't good. You can read Kanish's marvelous study. What else can I say about Ibn al-Arabi? I will talk about his influence. Ibn al-Arabi was highly, highly, highly influential. His ideas were really permeated throughout the Islamic world. There is scarcely a manuscript library anywhere in the Islamic world that does not have at least one and usually several manuscript copies of the Fusus al-Hikam and commentaries on them. When Osman Yahya wrote that 2-volume work in French, he said there were probably about 120 commentaries. The number is much bigger than that. In my own research, I would say that the number is in the hundreds, just in Arabic. And if you include Persian and Turkish and so forth, you may well break the 1,000 mark. So here is an example of a late commentary. This is the last commentary that was written on the Fusus al-Hikam in India, in the Persian language. Whoa. Because I cannot hold the mic and do this at the same time. These are my notes. So this book is called At-Ta'wil al-Muḥkam fi Mutashabih Fusus al-Hikam. Was written in Jumada al-Thaniya 1332, corresponding to May 1914 in the Common Area in Lucknow at the Matba Munshina wal-Kishore. And this is by, you can look at that here. It's beautiful. It's by Maulana Muhammad Hassan Amrohawi, not to be confused with Muhammad Ahsan Amrohawi. Muhammad Hassan Amrohawi was a proper orthopractic Sunni Muslim, unlike another gentleman from the same town of Amroha. So this is a beautiful, beautiful, this is a commentary in Persian. I don't want this to fall. I really like this book, and I've spent an hour late into the night with this work. So he was highly influential, and he influenced everybody that comes after him. And this figure I spoke about, I spoke about in another video on Jalaluddin Rumi. You can consult that video. There is a chance that they met. They could have met. Whether they actually did or not is hard to say. Rumi was in Damascus around the same time, according to Franklin Lewis, who is a scholar, a Rumi scholar, a modern Rumi scholar who was from the University of Chicago. But there is a figure, and that is the figure of Fakhruddin Iraqi, who also may have met Rumi. But Fakhruddin Iraqi studied with Sadruddin Qunawi, Ibn Arabi's disciple and stepson, and he studied the Fusus with him, and then he produced this book, which is in English. So this is an excellent introduction, actually, to the system of Ibn Arabi, again, by the indefatigable Professor Chittick. May Allah grant him health. He is, mashallah, still working very hard, even in his advanced years. So this is a really important book in which Fakhruddin Iraqi wrote in Persian, and he brings out this notion of divine love, which is also there in Ibn Arabi. And there's an influence that goes all the way back time to Al-Ghazali's brother, Abu Hamid Al-Ghazali's brother, Ahmad Al-Ghazali, who wrote a book on divine love called the Sawaneh in Persian. And sort of Fakhruddin Iraqi sort of picks up the torch, combines these doctrines of Ibn Arabi, and then the ideas of Ibn Arabi sort of permeate throughout the Persian-speaking world. And they lead ultimately, and they culminate with Hafiz, the great poet Hafiz, and the emergence of what we may call the Mazhab-e-Ishq. And so if you're interested in Hafiz, there's this beautiful book by Leonard Lewison. Unfortunately, I was never able to meet this gentleman before he passed away, but he was a good friend and colleague of my friend Sajjad Rizvi, and I exchanged a couple of emails with Professor Lewison, but we weren't able to meet in the UK. This is a beautiful volume edited by Professor Lewison on Hafiz and the religion of love. There's also an influence on someone named Mahmud Shabistari. Mahmud Shabistari wrote a very important book called the Gulshan-e-Raz. These are the collected works of Sheikh Shabistari. And again, Leonard Lewison has written on him. He has this book, Beyond Faith and Infidelity, the Sufi Poetry and Teachings of Mahmud Shabistari. So I highly recommend that. Anyhow, a lot more could be said, as always, but these are some of the key works on Ibn al-Arabi. I would like to mention one more work, I think, on Ibn al-Arabi before, or a couple of more before I conclude. I was talking about the influence on Ibn al-Arabi. So Ibn al-Arabi has been influential down into modern times. And he's influenced a lot of sort of these modern versions of Sufism that talk about how you can be a Sufi without being a Muslim. Again, Ibn al-Arabi was a Muslim throughout his life. There wasn't a day that went by when he didn't do his prayers and didn't perform what Muslims are supposed to do. Sufism is a sort of advanced level of Islam, and you cannot be a Sufi without being a Muslim. But he has influenced certain modern so-called Sufi movements. One of these is Frithjof Schuon and his people. So there is a very interesting antidote to the reception of Ibn Arabi by the Schuon Circle by Gregory A. Lipton, entitled Rethinking Ibn al-Arabi. I think this video is getting a little long, so I'll just put that out there and you can go read about it on Amazon. And then we've had occasion to mention more than once in this video a group known as Bishara. This volume, which I may call an insider account by Suha Taji al-Faruqi, talks about, Bishara and Ibn Arabi. They also have espoused this view that that there's Muslim with a small m and Muslim with a capital M. And oddly enough, they see themselves as sort of doing the work of Ibn Arabi, and somehow Ibn Arabi is connected with the second coming of Christ, and so on and so forth. Again, if you want to believe, you can believe whatever you like. But what this really has to do with the actual teaching of Ibn Arabi is another matter. So, as we just conclude, I want to conclude with the person I think who is the most profound interpreter of Ibn al-Arabi in the modern world, and that is none other than Henri Corbin. And Corbin wrote this masterpiece of a book. This is not an easy book to read. It's called Creative Imagination in the Sufism of Ibn Arabi. But I think it's one of the most profound treatments of Ibn Arabi and his ideas that has ever been written, probably in any language. That's my opinion. Go and read it and decide for yourself. So to conclude, Muḥyī al-Arabi is, as I said, easily the most influential thinker in the history of Islam. Even if you strongly disagree with him, even if you hate him, even if you think that he is a heretic, you cannot be silent about Ibn Arabi. You have to take a position. And to give you an idea of his influence reached all the way into China. Professor Chittick and Professor William Chittick's wife, Sachiko Murata, has devoted the last several decades to the study of the influence of Ibn Arabi on figures in Muslim figures in China. And she has brought out a number of works. The only one which I actually read many years ago was Chinese Gleams of Sufi Light. And since then, 2 other works have come out with rather elaborate titles and one figure is named Liu Qi, and another one is named Ma Wang, something or the other. And please forgive me, I'm completely butchering the Chinese names. But if you go on Amazon and type in Sachikumurata, you'll see. So what we know is that some version of the Fusus al-Hikam was paraphrased and into classical Chinese and influenced these figures who were also in dialogue with Confucianism or Neo-Confucianism. And so that shows the influence of Ibn Arabi. And Ibn Arabi continues to be a great influence all the way down to modern times. He is a bit difficult, but I think that if you're really interested, if you begin with these simple books that I started out with, you can learn a lot. And so my conclusion is that if you just want to start with Ibn Arabi, here it is, this book. And if you want to end with Ibn Arabi, it's Henri Corbin's Creative Imagination, although you never really end. And again, maybe someone out there will be inspired to take up the study of Arabic and approach the study of Ibn Arabi in the original. Thank you very much for watching. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share.